So, there are two different kinds of chi-square tests for two-way tables, which, if you think about that top right box with all your calculations and all that kind of stuff in it, okay, that top right box is the same no matter what. Is this okay? Because the mechanics are the same. In the same way that doing a one-sample t-test versus a paired t-test, we do them both the same way in the calculator, even though we do them in different circumstances. Okay? Because mechanically, the actual calculations are the same. It's just the, other part that's not the same. Okay? All right. So, a test for independence, which we might also call a test for association. Okay? Those two things are looking for a relationship between two variables within one population. Yes?
For the homogeneity, the null and the...
Oh, here. This is supposed to be a difference. Sorry. Okay. The key word here is that we have two distinct populations. Really, what I want you guys to see here is the word treatments. Okay? So one is looking for the relationship between two variables within one population. One is looking for the differences in proportion of a variable within two separate groups. In reality, your best rule of thumb is we use homogeneity in experiments. And we use independence in observational studies. Is that a sure-footed, always going to work rule? Meh. But it is a decent rule. Okay? You guys feeling good so far?
Yeah.
All right. So as we look to go to this one of the first things I asked you guys, this is the exact same stuff that we just did, right? Is this an observational study or an experiment? And we said experiment. So we're going to go ahead and say, we're going to draw our things, just like we always have. We're going to write our hypotheses. Oh man, this just looks real bad. Our null hypothesis is there is no difference in assignment completion for the different music groups. Notice how I'm writing that in context. Our alternative is? There is a difference.
And do we just have to say there is a difference?
Yep, as long as one of them is done well, I'll accept it.
Will it call it for?
Yeah.
Okay.
There usually it says at least one hypothesis is written in context. Yes?
Should there be anything about in proportion to the other ones? Because a difference in assignment completion, obviously there's going to be one if the sizes of each of the treatment groups are different.
So if you wanted to say there is no difference in proportion of assignment completion, that would be fine. If you're worried about it. Okay. All right. So, guys, for this particular one, which one should I say? A chi-square test for homogeneity or a chi-square test for association? Chi-square test for homogeneity. Okay, and let's do our conditions. The first one is? Random. And we were given?
SRS. No, we weren't.
No, it was 150 volunteers, remember?
Yeah.
Treatments randomly assigned.
Treatments were randomly assigned. And again, guys, even I started writing that. Instead of saying treatments, why don't we say music groups were randomly assigned? Do you guys see what I'm saying there? Like that subtle difference makes a difference. Good so far?
And then don't you have the values for expected on the page?
We sure large sample size.
Okay, so what we would typically do here is, I know I 21, as long as you write them in the table, like up here somewhere, that's fine. If you write them in that matrix. And I'm just. Okay. Now, and we're going to say all expecteds are greater than or equal to 5. Now, on the AP exam, we would not have calculated those yet, right?
But we won't until we run our test.
So you, at this point, I would probably just go in and run the test and go back and look at the calculator to get those values. Okay? All right? And then independent.
Homework completion
Treatments are right.
is independent.
Individuals' assignment completion is independent. Probably not actually true. So, for example, on any given test, if one of you finishes, does that influence whether or not somebody else finishes?
There is always
Yes.
a burst of people coming up all at once.
You mean right at the end? Yeah.
No, I mean like right at the beginning.
Yeah, because like you
No,
wait
it's
for
one
someone
person
to
that
go
goes
in
and then triggers
everyone
people
does.
who are
Because
waiting.
sometimes I'm like, do you want me to put it in there or like hand it to you
Well,
over
that
there?
and also like, did I? Because it's happened in geometry where I finished before everyone because I accidentally skipped a page.
Oh, you still what?
Yeah.
So now you have to go back and check.
Well, I did. I swear I did. It just like reappeared. But
Just reappeared.
I heard that Mrs. Downer is sneaky like that she likes to put like pages written in invisible ink. Yeah. She just flicks a button and all of a sudden new questions appear on the test. That'd be pretty hilarious. What if I could do that?
no.
I would
No.
go.
I would totally be the teacher that did that, just to be funny. Okay. Yesterday we calculated chi-squared.
5, 6, 2, 8.
I forget how to do this in my calculator.
We'll go over it in a second. With my 2 degrees of freedom and a p-value of
0.7547.
0.7547. Hey guys, what do you think of that p-value?
Very high.
This is a very high p-value, yes. So what does that mean?
We cannot.
Since 0.7547 is greater than 0.05, we cannot reject the null. And therefore, we cannot conclude that something. What do you guys not want to conclude?
That
there's a
music
difference.
influences assignment completion.
Has a difference.
Influences the proportion of students who finish assignments.
Okay, but what's different about this?
Nothing, other than the calculation.
No, I'm saying like, how would we identify that it was a test for homogeneity if such a question is pretty much the same and like the answers are different?
It's an interesting question, right?
So you're never gonna have a two-way table that's not, it's always gonna be either homogeneity or independent.
It's going to be one of those two. So how is that different from a goodness of fit? That answer has to do with the number of variables. Because we have 2 variables here. Goodness of fit only has 1 variable.
And the two variables would be the music and then if they complete the task or not.
The type of music listened to and whether or not it was completed.
Oh, and, okay, so you would just say, okay.
All right, so a real quick brief reminder on how to do this in the calculator. Camera. On. Insert video. All right, I'm gonna do this to see if it helps fix what happened yesterday. All right, so you guys remember we went into that matrix menu to bring up the matrix and we went over to edit. And this one we want to be 2 by 3, yes? Let's just do this. Those of you at home, say hi to my shoes. There we go. And a little. All right. And so we want a 2 by 3 matrix. And in that 2 by 3 matrix, we're going to put just the observed counts. Zoom in a little bit further here. So 23, 31, 26, 22, 23, 25. Right? I got that in right? And remember, if we hit stat, then arrow over to test, choose the other chi-square test that's not goodness of fit. It's going to ask you for where did you put the observed and where would you like me to store the expected. Hey guys, if you try to run one of these tests and it doesn't ask you for a matrix, it's because you picked goodness of fit instead of. You guys see what I'm saying? And so how do you know which one to use? If you can't put the data in a list, like I can't put this data table in a list, can I? If you can't put it in a list, then, you know. You guys with me? All right, I go down to calculate. You know what, I'm going to go to draw just so you guys can see the picture of the chi-square graph.
Oh yeah, it was hosted by Ohio Christian University, so they were like subtly trying to like really push the Christian agenda. The MSL Leadership Conference.
So as you guys can see,
Wait, but how would you,
this is a picture of the chi-square curve. Okay, and you can still see the chi-squared and the p-value. If you do it the other way where you do the calculations, which is what I recommend you do, where you just do that, it'll also give you the degrees of freedom, but it'll still give you the same chi-square value and the same p-value. Okay? Is this okay?
Thank you for breaking my calculator. Emma is doing something to my God.
All right, and that's there. Everybody good? Let's look at when they're treatment groups, they are definitely distinct populations from each other, okay? These are Sabrina. No. Why not?
That's 3.
This is a 2 by 3 table, right? So this is definitely 3 different categories. Here, another one. I'll let you guys read this real quick. So you guys know, I'm still terrified of things I watched as a child. I hate leprechauns. Like, hate.
You hate Leprechaun.
Leprechaun?
Man, is it a movie? Yeah.
Is it the Disney movie?
No.
Did anyone
I
ever watch
love-
Romeo and Juliet?
I love that
I love
movie.
that movie. It was
That's
so funny.
I am also terrified of clowns, but I've only seen the first 15 minutes of it, and then my mom said I was in big trouble because I wasn't supposed to be watching scary movies. True story, if I were to tell my mom now that I watched it, she would say, "You're a dummy." She would use a different word. And then she would call me a dummy and say, "You know you're scared of scary movies. Why would you do that to yourself?" All of these are true stories about Liz Meister, who is a terrifying in her own right.
Were you at the spread when you watched Through the Air?
Now, in all seriousness, have any of you watched something that you know is ridiculous, but you still get scared when certain things happen? For example, because of the movie Leprechaun, I walk up to my car, especially at night, and I open the door like this. Because in that movie, there was a scene of the leprechaun reaching from underneath the car.
Oh.
And
if you slice your Achilles, you're gone.
yeah, so, and I still do the check the back seat no matter what. This level of fear. I don't know if you guys remember the movie I Know What You Did Last Summer. Also, it was such a not scary movie when I was a teenager. It was kind of it was in the same realm as the Scream movies. So it wasn't scary, but I was still terrified. And to this day, if I'm driving and I hear a scratching in my car, I flip out. And I don't like mice either, all from things that frighten me as a child, when in reality they're probably not that scary. You guys know what I'm saying?
I'm scared that there's a raccoon in the trash can because my brother told me that. So I kick the trash can whenever I put a trash bag into it, outside and by the alley.
We currently are fighting a mouse in my kitchen.
Oh no!
And I heard it this morning. And I spent the rest of the morning getting ready, cooking breakfast like this. Banging pots, everything, because I wanted because I know it's more scared of me than I am of it, but I'm pretty darn scared of it.
Won't your dogs catch it?
Oh, my dogs like to think that they're useful. They bark. You know, I'm going to pause this video for... So speaking of fright symptoms. All right. So in this particular case, we have this two-way table that's basically saying, hey, if we stayed scared from something innocuous as a child, it doesn't stick with you. And the answer for Miss Meister is definitely a resounding yes. So this question is all about, does that change with gender? Everybody good? All right. So how many populations are we talking about here?
2. One population.
One sample, one group. Okay? Now, how many? This time we have 2 variables. Whereas here, not. All right. Also, was this an observational study or an experiment? Observational study.
I think an experiment would be inhumane.
Right?
That would be so.
It would not pass an ethics review board, for sure. Okay. So, my null hypothesis should be there is no association between fright symptoms and gender. Anybody want to take a stab at the alternative hypothesis? There is an association. See, this is fun, isn't it? Isn't it? Okay. And guys, what do you think the appropriate procedure is for this? Chi-squared. Test. 4. Independence. I'm going to put association, but it doesn't really matter. They're the same thing. They're, in fact, the exact opposite thing. If 2 events are independent, they are not associated. If they are associated, they're not independent. But, whatever. I chose that one because of the wording of the null hypothesis. but it doesn't really matter. So if I would have said fright symptoms and gender are independent variables, and then said they're not independent, then I would have chose chi-square test for independence. It honestly, you can use either interchangeably. It will cause 0 problems for you. Okay? Random?
Given in sample.
But there wasn't, it's just a sample.
Gender is random.
Must assume.
Oh, can we actually write that? Like,
Yeah. That's what I might add from there. Proceed with caution. What I definitely would not do is not do it. Okay? All right. Next.
Expected values are greater than 5.
Let's go ahead and say
Ooh, I love that.
what those are.
11.6.
Oh, so you already ran it?
Yeah.
Okay. 11.6.
24.3 to the right. 26.3 and then 54.6.
Wait, are you assuming that they're 50-50?
No, Emma ran the test in her calculator already, is what she's saying. So let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and show you how Emma came up with those numbers, okay? So she went in. Emma, tell me if I'm doing something wrong here, okay? She went in, she edited her matrix to a 2x2, where she gave the two-way table from the question. 7, 29, 31, and 50. Put those into the matrix menu of her calculator. I don't know if that's actually recording, so I'm gonna. Oh. Hey guys. What did I do? Guys, how do I do this?
Flip the camera.
Oh, flip the camera. Are you taking a picture?
I don't know. I don't know how to flip the camera back. We're just gonna stop that. Sorry guys, and let's try this again.
There we go.
Why wasn't that an option though? You guys saw there wasn't an option there, right?
Did you just tap the screen and then it changed?
Oh, I bet I tapped it. It can't switch once I don't know.
You're recording.
That's a good thing, I think, because I ran into another issue with another class trying to insert the video earlier. Okay, so I want to be recording. So everybody good getting that into the calculator again. We just hit matrix, go over to edit, and then make it match what's on our paper, okay? And so we'll go ahead and hit from there, stat, test, choose the chi-square test. It's option C. Observed, expected. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. So we find our value for chi-squared to be 4.03, my p-value to be 0.045, with 1 degree of freedom. All right. Now, some things worth pointing out. If you write your expected values here versus in the table, it really doesn't matter. I think there's some benefit to looking at them next to each other, okay? And is anything jumping out at you? Yep.
I'm pregnant. So what is this, what is the expected value? Is that, is it assuming that there is?
It's assuming the independence. Remember, no matter what kind of test you're doing, any significance test, anything we write, null and alternative hypotheses, we assume the null hypothesis is true. The way we assume the null hypothesis is true here is we say, is calculating those expected values. So when you think about how did the calculator go through that process? It said we how did we get that 11.6? What did the calculator do to get that? Okay. And what it did, it said, is that people answered yes 36 out of the 117 times. And so those two events, so like the way we calculate that value is assuming that the null hypothesis is true. And that's how we do that for this particular test. And we say, hey, we saw differences, right? When we look at this, those expected values do not match what actually happened. So could those differences have occurred by chance? Or did those differences, because this is just a random sample, right? Theoretically, we hope. Okay? So could it be if we took a different sample that it would flip-flop the other way around? Sure, it's possible. Okay? So what happens is we calculate that p-value and we say, what's the probability we could have seen these differences? So when you use the chi-squared distribution in your calculator, whether it's I give you chi-squared and you do chi-squared CDF, or what the calculator does when you do it in this test menu, okay? What it does, that chi-squared, it assumes the null hypothesis is true and finds the probability, okay? All right, so help me with my conclusion here, y'all.
We can conclude the null hypothesis, and therefore we reject.
You can reject the null hypothesis.
Yeah.
Okay. So since 0.045 is less than 0.05, we can reject H0. And therefore, we can conclude there is an association between gender and fright symptoms.
Should we say, because it's sort of like obvious which one like has less?
I was going to get there in just a second. Now, in this particular case, I think there's value in talking about it. Now, one of the things I want to point out, because like I said, there were a few people who on the quiz, which I will pass back while you guys are preparing your debate topic. Okay? One of the things that came up on the quiz is people said the wrong habitat area for those mice, whether it was field versus whatever, okay? What you want to look at is not that 29 is bigger than 7. You shouldn't be talking about these two numbers at all. You should be talking about these two numbers, that 29 is bigger than what was expected if they weren't independent or there wasn't an association. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Like, the 29 is more than what was expected, not the 29 is more than the males. Yes, Everest, his hand's been up.
We just concluded the alternative hypothesis.
That's what you're supposed to do. Reject the null, and therefore you can conclude the alternative.
We weren't allowed to conclude the
You're not allowed to conclude the null hypothesis. If you can't reject the null, you still have two hypotheses. So you can't conclude which one is true. If you can reject the null, then you only have one hypothesis left. You're allowed to conclude it.
Okay.
Yes, Emma.
For the one on the quiz, I thought we had to see which had the greatest conditional
Contribution to chi-squared.
contribution, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so that would be like the same thing as comparing.
But like, okay, so let's say the contributions to chi-squared, that question was which one did the mice prefer?
Yeah.
So if you picked an area that didn't have that, the highest contribution to chi-squared didn't necessarily need to be which area did the mice prefer. It could have also been which area did the mice hate. Because when they were far away from another area, that would also suggest an issue. It would still have a high value for chi-squared if there were not nearly as many as should have been in that area proportionally. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. Okay? How are we feeling so far about chi-square tests? Yes?
Good. Can you explain explain again what the chi-squared actually means, like what the 4.03 value?
Yeah, all right.
If we haven't talked about it,
I mean, we have, but it's a murky explanation. So I'm going to say it again because it is something that is a little bit more like I'm going to explain it to you, okay? So when we look at this data table, okay, let me kind of zoom in here. For every single one of these cells, they don't meet expectations, right? So we can say that the 7 and the 11.6 are off from each other. Okay. The minute these two didn't match each other, these two weren't going to match each other, as were these two not going to match each other, as were these two, right? Okay. So there's like this interlinked unexpectation. Okay? Is that kind of... So like chi-squared is kind of like the sum total unexpectedness of the group.
Okay. So is that expecting that it'll be like 4 people kind of off of the expected?
It's the unexpectedness of our group, of our data table, of whatever our data is. So when we go back to
Observational studies for the independence, should we just say individual responses or independent?
no, that's when you would use the 10% condition.
Oh, okay.
So we haven't done the independence for this one yet, right?
Yeah, that's why I was like wondering.
So our independence condition here
Um,
is going to be 117 is less than 10% of all college kids. And that's probably true at almost every college. Even the small liberal arts arts ones. I said kids, but I'm going to sit right down students here because technically they're adults. We feeling good? I'm going to pause for a second. Keep going here. This last part is just some bonus knowledge. It's not a big deal, okay? Now, we did 2 sample z-tests a long time ago. And when you think about what this is, couldn't we have done a null hypothesis where we said PW equals PM, women equals men, and our alternative was just that they are not equal to? Because when you think about this, we can essentially say P hat W is 29 out of 79, yeah? And P hat M is equal to 7 out of 38. Are you guys with me that we could have done it that way? And if we did this, we would then have a 2-sample z-test for PW minus PM.
Why is it the minus the PW minus PM?
Because theoretically, this is the same thing as PW minus PM equals 0. So technically, the distribution we're talking about is this one. It's the difference between, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. In terms of which hypothesis you should write, they're the same. Is everybody good? So guys, can you choose the 2 prop z-test in your calculator for me, please? And for P hat 1, for X1 do 29, X2, or N1, 70. I'm going to shut up and just let you guys do this. And do you guys think, and I haven't done this, we didn't get through these notes last year, but do you guys think I can guess what the z-score and the p-value are?
Sure.
I bet the z-score is, in fact, 2. Negative. It's negative. No, I lied. It's positive. 2.01, and our p-value is 0.045. Would anybody like to guess how I knew what that was?
Well,
The p-value is the same.
Is it
Yeah.
half of chi-squared?
It is not half.
Hold on.
Square root of.
It is the square root of chi-squared. Okay, so now, could I have done that exact same thing here? 2 by 2, it's still just two proportions, and you're going to end up with very similar results. Everybody cool? But this really only, this is a kind of a niche situation, so it really only fits in this situation. Now,